Perfect. Thank you. All right, let's get started. So thanks for being here, everyone. I'm looking forward to sharing all of the knowledge I've gained over the many years on KPIs and specifically KPIs for nonprofits. So I'll tell you a bit about me and why I know as much about KPIs as I do. I have an undergraduate degree in psychology and then followed that with an MBA from SFU. And I spent the next 10 years after graduate school building a tech company from idea to profitability. And in that time, we managed to learn absolutely everything the hardest way possible. So that was fun. It was a roller coaster. And in the end, we did manage to sell the company to a large competitor. And I spent the next year, this was in 2018, I spent the next year soul searching, studying things that interested me and trying to figure out what to do next. And that's when I came across Keela. I knew I wanted something with more meaning, something that felt purpose driven beyond simply tech, but tech was really what I knew. And when I came across Keela and I spoke to our founder, Najid, I realized that Keela really marries tech with purpose. And Keela's aim is to really help nonprofits to do more good in our world. So after a year with Keela, I can truly say that this is one purpose-driven, passionate company that's dedicated to supporting nonprofits. And one thing we do really well at Keela is we measure everything that matters. So we make the right decisions so we can grow our company, build better tools for our customers, and then spend any extra time and resources we have helping the nonprofits raise more money so they can make more impact. Now, if you're interested in learning more about fundraising in general, nonprofit management, we have actually just released a 9-chapter fundraising course that's completely free, and it's called Keela U. You can find it on our website under resources, or I think here in the chat, we'll provide a link for you. Again, it's completely free. I think you get 15 CFRE credits as well. So it's a great resource if anyone wants to brush up on their fundraising skills. Now, one more note on that before I begin. I did receive some feedback the last time I did this webinar that there was not enough discussion on KPIs for nonprofits that don't fundraise or KPIs specifically for impact. And that's still true. I haven't added that stuff in. I thought about it. This course really is focused on fundraising KPIs. And that's not because there aren't many great ways to measure impact or other important areas of nonprofit organizations. It's simply because adding all the possible KPIs and delving into impact measurement would make this course incredibly long. So if anyone's really interested in that and thinks that would be valuable to them, let us know. Send an email, send a note, even put something in the chat, and that would be great. And then I can build something around specifically impact measurement, because I know that's a hot area right now, and it's something that deserves an hour of its own. So with that, let's dive in. There we go. So let's start with something fun. I want you to imagine you're driving a car. In fact, let's make it a fun car, a red convertible. You're cruising down the freeway. There's lots of other cars around you, but you're a pretty good driver. You're quite comfortable behind the wheel. Someone's changing lanes in front of you. Your exit's approaching. You see far up ahead, traffic's slowed a bit. Now I want you to freeze this moment. What information have you subconsciously taken in up to this point? What information has made you feel calm and comfortable behind the wheel? So first, you can see through your windshield, right? You know, there's 2 car lengths in front of you. You know that your speedometer is telling you you're going just slightly above the speed limit, which is actually a reasonable speed for this stretch of road. You know your car's functioning and reliable, or your check engine light would be on. And finally, you can glance in any of your mirrors to see what's behind you and around you. Now, I want you to imagine for a second that I remove your speedometer. Now I remove your check engine light. And now I cover your windshield. All you have left is your rear view mirror. What do you think would happen next? There's really only 2 possibilities. 1, you would crash, or 2, you would keep going for a little while and not crash. You wouldn't know where you were going, but there's a good chance people would get out of your way and you might cruise along a little longer. Now, building an organization without KPIs is exactly the same thing. You're moving forwards, maybe, But success is really only measured by not crashing. And the rear view mirrors, these are like your year-end reports. They simply show you that you didn't crash. They show you after the fact what you didn't crash into. They might also show you what exit you didn't manage to take. So the point I'm trying to make here with this story is that, believe it or not, everyone can get used to driving this way. They go really slowly and they crash all the time. But if no one knows any better way, they assume this is just how you drive. This is just how you build an organization. I spent 10 years building an organization, and we looked at nothing but the rearview mirror. We looked at nothing but our year-end report. I would draw conclusions about what I thought we should do next year, and then I'd make a plan, and I'd jump back behind the wheel, and off I went. No windshield, no speedometer, no KPIs. There's still far too many organizations that drive like this, using nothing but their gut feelings to guide them day to day, and then their year-end report to look back at their results for the year that's now over. They don't know how they really did until that year-end report is finalized. Now, I recognize that some things may be measured along the way. Things like, say, donations received to date, or number of donors in the database. And maybe you've stepped it up a notch and you're tracking things like average gift size quarterly. And these are really good steps, don't get me wrong. If you're tracking 2 to 3 KPIs quarterly, you're better than many. You're probably driving like this. So you can see right in front of you. You generally can avoid crashing, but you can't really see far enough ahead to make strategic decisions. Furthermore, you're probably feeling a decent amount of anxiety. Running an organization without being able to see clearly is a really daunting task for anybody. And if a few key donors leave, do you really know why? If your campaign falls flat and let's say you raise half of what you were expecting, do you know exactly what to change next time? When your year-end report shows you that recurring donations have dropped, do you know how to fix it? Now think again, do you really know, or is that you kind of checking your gut again and making a guess? So what I want to show you today is how to drive like this. So if my driving metaphor left you with any conclusion, and I hope it's that KPIs are important, but what on earth are they? And how do you use them to make your life easier and your organization stronger? So let's start at the beginning. KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator. It could also be called a measure, a metric, or simply a number that stands for something. It's a measure of some part of your organization that tells you something over time. And the part of KPI that I want to focus on is the K, which is the word key. Because if you measure everything, you're only mildly better off than if you measure nothing at all. Too much data creates noise, and you won't know what to focus on and why. You won't know what to look at. You won't know what to make decisions around. And when you design your KPI dashboard, it's critical that you choose your KPIs based on what you want to measure, and then you understand why that is important. So there's 3 kinds of KPIs, 3 buckets. So let's walk through them so you understand the difference, because they're all equally important. The first is KPIs that the board wants you to track, and perhaps it's average gift size, donor lifetime value, or something totally obscure and unusual that is relevant to your organization. These are the metrics that the board wants you to report on each quarter. So it's not only important that you understand how to measure them, but it's important you understand how your actions day to day and week to week affect them. Second, we have KPIs used as benchmarks in your industry. And these are the big KPIs that usually define the most important elements of any nonprofit. Some examples are donor retention rate, donation growth rate, and open rate if you're using email marketing as your main source of communication. And we'll touch on all of these a little bit. The next bucket or category is management KPIs. And these are simply KPIs that you determine are important for you and your team to understand the impact that your initiatives are having day to day, week to week. These are the ones we're going to focus in on today for the purpose of this webinar, because these are the ones that are most often neglected. So these KPIs, these management KPIs, are usually leading indicators, while the board and benchmark KPIs are often lagging indicators. And I will touch on that again if that's completely over your head. Don't worry, we'll go into that in detail. So one last thing I want to leave you with, this is an important thing to note before you make your dashboard, is that consistency matters even more than accuracy. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying, because if your metrics are not accurate, you're not going to trust them at all and you're not going to use them. But if you know they're close to accurate or as accurate as they can be, then it's more important that you're consistent in the way you measure them. And I'll tell you why. You'll be looking at trends over time. And the most dangerous thing you can do is to shift the way you're measuring it month after month in an attempt to be, let's say, more and more accurate. But what you're going to do is you're going to instead collect rather meaningless data, because instead of your data shifting because of the actions you're taking in your organization, your data is going to be shifting because of the change in measurement. So it's important to be as accurate as you can be, but then once you're there, be insanely consistent in how you measure. There are an infinite number of KPIs that you could choose to measure. So where do you even begin? Now, I'm going to recommend you select a few KPIs like the ones you see in this list. And these are kind of the common fundraising KPIs. And then you're going to go in and you're going to add KPIs that are specific to your organization. From there, you simply begin. You begin measuring. And then as soon as you start to understand your metrics, you're going to see the need for new measures. You're going to say, well, this metric is great, but unless I know its ratio to this metric, it doesn't really tell me what I need. So you're going to add a ratio. More on that in a second. If you've ever been told to just jump in and start, this is one of those initiatives. KPIs are going to make more and more sense the more you measure them, watch them, and discuss them. And that's key. You need to be discussing these with your team. So starting can be the hardest part, but I'm going to give you a nudge and ask you just to get started, and you'll see it'll come to light in front of your eyes. We're going to cover 5 KPIs, and it's not because they're the most important KPIs, and I'll show you why after. Each KPI is a different type. So let's start with a very simple one, okay? Total funds raised. Everyone is measuring this, at least you should be. And it's simply a count of dollars raised. Next, we have donation growth rate. Now, donation growth rate is the rate at which your donations grow. This could be month over month, or more likely it's year over year. Now, here's an interesting note. We're focusing for the purposes of this webinar and management KPIs on shorter term metrics, because we want to avoid this looking back at the year behind you idea that everyone's naturally doing. So consider making donation growth rate maybe recurring donation growth rate. And I'll tell you why. In this case, month over month growth rate for recurring donations is especially important because recurring donations experience less volatility. You're going to add 5, 10, 15 new recurring donors each month, and your new donations are going to add to the already steady stream that you receive monthly, assuming your recurring donations are monthly. So a growth rate like that would give you more insight than looking at a really volatile growth rate of total donations month over month, because it might spike up, drop down, spike up, less useful. Next KPI I want to look at is fundraising ROI. Now, this metric, ROI, means return on investment. And it's simply how much money you raised after all costs were accounted for. So let's dig into a little bit. Let's dig into a little bit. If you spend $5,000 on a campaign that raised $40,000, your ROI would be $40,000 less or minus the $5,000 in costs divided by that same $5,000 in costs. When you convert it to a percentage, that's 700%. It's a pretty good ROI for that campaign. Now, as a year-end metric for your board, you can combine all your campaigns for a single fundraising ROI metric. It shows how you've spent the money, and it shows if you've done well or not. But be careful if you get stuck doing this month over month, because it won't tell you which campaigns have been most successful or which campaigns are actually losing you money and you should stop altogether. So what you want is your metrics to tell you what to do next, how to make decisions, what to do more of, what to do less of, and what to stop doing altogether. Fundraising ROI is a perfect example, because if you're using it to make decisions, it must be looked at per campaign. If you want to show your donors or your board how effectively you spent their money after the fact, you can use that total fundraising ROI for the year metric. So remember, you won't be able to use that total ROI number to make decisions, but it'll offer your stakeholders insight into your use of their funds. What I'm trying to say here is get clear on the purpose of each KPI and be sure that you use it for that purpose, whether it's decision-making for you in the short term or whether it's after the fact reporting for your board. Next, we have average gift size. This is simply the middle of the range of gifts you receive over a period of time. Now, this is one of my favorite metrics. Average gift size can tell you a lot. So on the surface, it's simply an average of your range of gifts. But when you look at this metric with other metrics, it shows you exactly where you're winning or losing in your efforts. Now, I want to tell you a quick story to illustrate this. One nonprofit I worked with was tracking average gift size annually. They'd never used it to make decisions. They simply gathered all their data at the end of the year, and then they would report on it. And they noticed one year that their average gift size had dropped significantly. They were really surprised because it had been one of their strongest years to date for total funds raised. They discussed it as a team and they couldn't really figure it out. And then someone made a comment and said, "Hey, could this be because of our new fundraising director?" Now, the new fundraising director was 28 years old, and the one before had been in her 40s. They looked at the campaigns and the events that they had run that year and realized that while they were all hugely successful, they were attracting a very different demographic of donor. Their donor list size had skyrocketed. Their engagement on social media had too. They had hundreds more donors, but each donor was contributing far less than their historical donor group. So this is great insight. Now imagine how much more effective they could have been if they had known this during the year, if they had known that their average gift size was going down, dropping month by month, but their number of donors was jumping. They could have done a lot of things strategically. They could have used methods to boost average gift size. They could have used methods to encourage online recurring donation signups, something that we know generally younger donors are far more willing to do. So the point I'm trying to make here is that by looking at a metric at the end of the year, you don't have a chance to use that data to make changes and get clever about how to maximize your results before they come to the end of the year, at which point it's too late. So last KPI I want to talk about for the purposes of this activity is recurring gift percentage. Now, anyone who understands subscription businesses recognizes the value of recurring donations. They may be relatively small individual amounts, but they add up. And they're a great way to allow donors to feel committed, to show they want to support longer term. And a monthly gift works with people's budgets, donors' budgets. So furthermore, it provides your organization with a reliable stream of funds. You get cash monthly if that's your recurring program. So I'm a big fan of recurring gift programs, but let's talk about the KPI. You're likely tracking total dollars received through recurring gift programs if you have one. And you're definitely tracking total dollars received. So how can you look at recurring gifts as a percentage of the total to help you make a better decision? So thinking back to my story about the organization that failed to use their average gift size until it was too late, this metric will allow you insight into what's really happening with your donors. So if you're attracting large numbers of a new demographic of donor and you see that your recurring gift percentage is increasing month over month, and you haven't actually changed communication or done a recurring gift campaign, it's safe to assume that this new demographic is more open to the idea of recurring gift programs. So this is when you lean in. You develop a campaign that targets them with this messaging around your recurring gift program. And you aim to sign up as many new donors as you can. So this is how you strategically use your data to make better decisions. Now, there's a reason that I chose to look at those KPIs specifically. And it's not because they're any better than any other KPIs. It's because each one is a different type of KPI. So starting at the beginning, we have total funds raised, which is simply a count of dollars. Then we have donation growth rate. Now this is a rate, the rate your donations change over time in this example. But a rate simply compares one measure per unit to something else. So next we have fundraising ROI, or return on investment, which always looks at the ratio between net profit and cost. You can technically calculate an ROI on anything you spend money on or time on. I think I'm supposed to push through these guys. 1 second. There we go. Next, we have average gift size. So average gift size is an average or a typical figure in a set of data. You can calculate averages on everything and anything, and it can be very useful to collect data in a way that you can make decisions using it. Finally, recurring gift percentage. This is a percentage of something else, a proportion of the whole. You can use counts, rates, ROIs, averages, percentages, and more to measure whatever matters to you. And you're going to start to see holes in your data. So once you become familiar with your KPI dashboard, you're going to realize that something like total funds raised is important, but what you really need to know is total funds raised per staff member. So you can be sure that your team is helping your growth and you know how to suggest a new hire to your board. You know at what point you can warrant a new hire because of your total funds raised per staff member rate that you've been tracking. Here's another list. Everyone asks, can I just see a whole list of KPIs so I can start writing some down and seeing what might work for my organization? Now, these are common KPIs you can see here for marketing and donor outreach. So email open rate is a really good one if you're using email marketing, or people opening your emails. Click-through rate, email sharing and forwarding rate. There are truly hundreds, if not thousands of KPIs. So you can look through these lists, but you're going to have to choose which ones you want to measure because measuring them all won't be useful or helpful. Here's common KPIs for measuring events and the success of your events: event check-ins, attendee satisfaction surveys, returning attendee percentage. There's quite literally hundreds. Now, when you build your dashboard, it's going to look something like this. There's a lot that you need to clarify before you begin to actually measure because, let's face it, there's not many numbers on this dashboard right now. So I'm going to walk you through this stage together because in each column is some very important information. Now you're going to be able to download a copy of this exact dashboard to get you started, but I want you to consider adding your own KPIs and removing any of the ones you don't actually need. So we're going to go through column by column to understand how to develop out this section. This process is really important. So first of all, you can see here in all your columns from left to right, that's what we're going to go through next. You've got KPI name. It's pretty obvious and self-explanatory. What are you going to call your KPI? Next, we have the definition, or what this KPI means. And this is important because you want to define precisely what this metric is intending to measure. You know it now, it's in your mind, it seems easy, but when you come back to this every month, when your team comes back to it, you want to have that definition clarified. Now, critically important is this idea of how it's measured. We talked about consistency over accuracy, and this is where you make sure you're consistent because you're going to write it down. You're going to write down exactly how you got the metric, from what source, and any calculations that you had to make. Next, we have why it matters. Now, this is where you're going to note your assumptions. For example, a donor engagement metric like email open rate. You're going to note here that the higher your open rate, the more engaged your donors, and maybe the more likely they are to read your next appeal and donate. Whatever assumption you're making about the KPI and how it's going to be affected by your team's efforts, you want to note this here. Monthly trends is the next column. You're going to track some metrics weekly, monthly, some quarterly, but make sure you note the time frame and you discuss the changes that you expect to see or any volatility or seasonality that you think might occur. Your benchmark is important. A lot of the metrics we're going to cover today have industry benchmarks that are published by a reputable think tank or an association. And the reason this is valuable is because they're going to show you how you're doing compared to your peers, compared to other organizations. Now remember, benchmarks are not the best or the worst. So if you're struggling to reach a benchmark, you need to consider how you're doing things. There's probably a lot of room for easy improvement. And finally, we have your goal. What is your team striving to hit? What is your target? I recommend waiting until you have at least 3 months of data to set your goals, or at least be really open to changing them because you won't know what's a realistic internal goal until you know what your baseline is. An important note, you're not going to read this and all of this data every time you use your dashboard. It might feel like a lot of work for no purpose, but the value in doing all of this at the beginning is thinking these things through and thinking through the expectations and what you think might happen with each KPI in the context of your team and your organization is what is going to make this dashboard valuable to you. If you take the time to do this, your entire team will be able to understand your metrics too. So you're not going to need to explain it every time. And let's be honest, if someone forgets, what's the definition of donor lifetime value? They might not ask in every meeting. Rather, they'll say, I'll figure it out as we go. And you're going to lose people. You're going to lose that engagement. So this is a really helpful way to get everyone aligned around your metrics. Eventually, your dashboard's going to look like this. But we're jumping ahead because there is one last and vitally important thing that I want to cover, and that's leading and lagging indicators. And after we discuss that, we're going to go in and we're actually going to do a quick analysis of this dashboard so you can see how you might do that in a meeting with your team. So before we do that, let's talk about lagging indicators. Now, this idea of leading and lagging indicators is a framework that single-handedly changed the way my team and I use KPIs. It considers every KPI and whether it's leading or lagging. So starting with lagging, because that's what we're most familiar with, these are final measures of the results you're working to achieve. It's a measure of something after the fact. So these often show you whether you've hit your target. Lagging indicators should actually measure your major organizational goals, whether you should have fewer lagging indicators, you should have fewer lagging indicators than leading indicators. And I'll tell you why in a second, but your lagging indicators, there's going to be anywhere from 3 to 5, but there should not be more than that because these are your major organizational goals. So here's an example. Total funds raised would be a common lagging indicator, assuming your organization is fundraising, right? So there's many measures of impact that can be developed. We've talked a bit about that. Based on how your programs are reaching people and whatnot. And these would definitely be lagging indicators. They look back, they show you what you've achieved. So this could simply mean looking back 1 month or 1 quarter, but lagging indicators measure the results, not the progress towards the results. So let's move to leading indicators because that's exactly what they measure. So a leading indicator is a measure of activity week to week, month to month that predicts your results at year end. So a leading indicator is a number that when you watch it really carefully, it allows you time to make changes before it's too late. Here's an example. Most metrics that measure donor engagement are leading indicators. Engaged donors donate. So this is because the more engaged and active your donors are, the more likely they're going to click on that email, the more likely they're going to click on that donate button and actually take that next step. If raising funds is one of your lagging indicators at the end, think of all the things your team does week over week, month over month to ensure that funds are raised. Measuring any one of these activities or these initiatives may be helpful, and these metrics are in your section called leading indicators. So leading indicators are important to classify because you want to be clear about what they achieve. And it may not be clear in the beginning, but soon you'll start to see that whenever donor engagement in one area improves, a lagging indicator like donor retention rate improves as well. Your leading and lagging indicators are connected. You might not know how exactly in the beginning, but you'll start to see the connections, the correlations when you get familiar with your data. So let's do a really quick pop quiz just to see if you've captured the idea of leading and lagging indicators. So you can write your answer in the comment section, or you can just shout it out. It's mostly for your testing your own knowledge. So is this a leading or lagging indicator? Let's start with total funds raised. That is a lagging indicator. This is your main goal as a fundraising organization, or at least one of your main goals. I'm not neglecting to recognize impact, obviously, is your main goal. So your next KPI that we want to test you on is website traffic. What do you think, leading or lagging? This is a leading indicator. Website traffic measures awareness, an important part of the donor journey, but not your end goal. How about email open rate? That's right, it's a leading indicator. This one measures engagement as a predictor of donations, but it's not our end goal. Again, it's one of the activities that help us get more donors. Next up, we have donor lifetime value. What do you think, leading or lagging? This one's a little harder. Yeah, you got it. It's a lagging indicator. So this metric's a combination of lifespan, average donation amount, and frequency. And this is one way to measure funds raised, and more importantly, the value of each donor to your organization. So that's great. You guys got it. I'm happy to see that. Let's take a final brush up on the things that matter most before we dive in and do our quick analysis. So you've got your baseline, or if you don't, you need to make a baseline. And a baseline simply means you figure out where you are today. If you can look back historically, 3, 6, 12 months, even better, you're going to be ahead of the game. But if you don't, you start measuring today. Measure each of your KPIs to know where you're starting from, because the reality is change over time is what gives you insight. So you're going to need to commit to doing this analysis of your metrics for at least 3 months. Preferably if you have historical data, you'll see those insights faster, but at least 3 months if you're starting from scratch today. Perfect. So let's start diving in. I think that is a link, but you've got it also in your notes section. I'm going to close this and move over to our dashboard so everyone can see. Now I'm going to be using my side screen because this dashboard is large. So hopefully you can tell I'm still looking at you guys, but I'm also looking over here to read my huge dashboard. So remember, you guys will have access to this. I'll give this exact copy to you and you can take it and use it for however you like, but please do make it your own. It's very important. So let's start at the beginning. The first thing up is website traffic. Now, website traffic is total unique visitors to our website. And if you do have a website, this one's really important. You can pull it from Google Analytics and see how many people are visiting. It's a great way to see if donors are engaged. Now, let's slide over and look at our numbers. We have an internal goal of 10,000 people a month to come to our website. And we're looking at the numbers from January all the way through to September. So you can see here that in January, we had 4,000 people at our website, February, 4,500 people, March, 4,200, staying pretty steady. And then in April, there's a huge jump, 6,500 people. That is a massive increase in 1 month. What on earth happened in April? May, June, all around 6,000, 6,800, and then another huge jump in August. So if I was analyzing this data, I would ask my team, what happened in April and what happened in August? Because obviously that really worked for getting awareness for our website and our organization. Well, April was our first event that we held, and August was our second big event for donors. So what we're doing is obviously working, and it's attracting the right kind of people to our website. And the thing that I would conclude from this is that even after our event in April, we still had over 6,000 people come to our website in May, June, and July. And those were months where we had no events. So this shows me that we're generating great awareness with our events and that we should continue doing them the way we have. Next up, we have email open rate. So this is the percentage of email recipients who open a given email. And this really measures donor engagement. Now we have a benchmark for this KPI, and it's just around 26%. So that tells us that of all the organizations that participate and give their data to these benchmark organizations, 26% of emails on average are being opened. So again, that's not the best and that's not the worst. If we're not hitting 26% open rate for our email campaigns and our e-blasts, we want to reconsider. So let's take a look. We've got 19, 18, and 16% in January, February, and March. That is way below the benchmark. I would really have looked at that closely, but something happens in April again. We've got 22%, which is a nice jump, 25%, and then up to 26%. So this is great. This shows me that something changed in April, and I'd really want to dig into why to make sure that we don't ever revert back to our old way of doing emails. And when we look into it, we realize that we hired Maggie. Maggie is our new fundraising director, and she started working with us in April. So whatever Maggie's doing, it's working. People are opening the emails and they're engaged. So I would want to document why. I would say, okay, Maggie, what did you change when you started doing our emails that we weren't doing before? Let's write that down and make sure we never abandon that habit, because it's obviously very effective for our donors. Next, we have email click rate. Now, this is the percentage of recipients who actually click on a link in our email. So it might be a donate now button. It might be a read this case study about one of our programs and how it's impacted some of our participants. So whatever it is, it shows further engagement. And this is a step towards becoming a donor. So you're getting the emails. Are you going to click on what's inside? And an industry benchmark for this is 13%. So again, you can see here, 9%, 11%, and 8% in January, February, March. And then it jumps up 12, 15, 14 to a high of 16%. Maggie is great at eBlasts. She obviously understands email marketing and how to give the donors something that they want to actually read and engage with. So again, she is doing fantastically well on this. Now, donor conversion rate is, in this context, it's the percentage of email recipients who click on a donate now link. So we're sending these emails. We're maybe making the ask for a donation after nurturing the donors and making sure that they're at a place where they're ready. And we're asking them to donate. Are they actually doing it? Again, we have a benchmark to show us where we stand. 17% is the benchmark. And you can see here that consistently from January right through to maybe June, we're way below benchmark at 11 and 12%. This is a concern. I can see that it's jumped up a little bit towards the end of the quarter in July, August, and September. And we'll talk about that in a second. But this tells me that while Maggie might be great at email marketing and she might understand how to write content that's enticing, she probably needs to brush up on how to make the ask, on how to convert donors. And there's best practices on this. It's not a secret. We could ask her to read up on it. We could ask her to go do a Keela U course on donor conversion. Whatever it is, it's worth it, because Maggie's great at eBlast. She's great at setting content that engages people, but she's not as good at getting them to make the donation. Let's move to the next KPI. And actually, to clarify, we're still in the section on leading indicators. I'll tell you when we switch to lagging indicators. These are measuring all the activities before we get to our end results. So we have average gift size, the average gift size of the donations from our donors. It's a simple concept, very valuable KPI. So there's no benchmark for this because it's different for every organization, but you can see our goal is $175. Now, our average gift size starts out at 150, which is decent, but you can see it's starting to drop. It's dropping to 142, then down to 138, 132. If this was my organization, in June, I would have been worried. I would have said, okay, something's going on here. I've seen this trend, it's dropping. We need to look at this closely and make sure that this isn't causing problems. And if it's not causing problems, make sure that, there's not an opportunity to raise this average gift size back up. Let's come back to this one because I want to show you how correlation works. Moving on to the next, we have donor list size. Now, this is simply the number of contacts we have in our database. So it's donors, it's potential donors. It's essentially our database list size, assuming everyone's a potential donor. Now, our goal is 10,000. It's a lot of contacts. You can see that we're jumping up pretty high, 5,000, 5,200, 5,600, 6,000 in May. Well, this is great. Now, glancing at these numbers, can you tell me which month we had the largest number of donors join, or the largest number of contacts, the biggest growth in our contact list? I don't know that I could tell you exactly which month without really kind of doing some math or staring hard at these numbers. So that's an important consideration because that's what you want to know. You want to know which months you did really well acquiring new donors or new potential donors and which months you didn't do as well. So you can keep doing what's working and stop doing what isn't working. So I want to look at a different way to look at the exact same data. So this is simply how many people you've added to your contact list. So we're going to look at donor list growth rate. It's the same data, but you're looking at it now as a percentage. What percentage is your list growing by each month? You can see here we've got 6%, 5%, 7%, 5%. It's kind of all over the place. Again, obviously March was a big growth month at 7%, but then every month thereafter kind of hovers in and around 4, up and down, up and down. Again, which month was the biggest? I can't really tell. I actually don't think this is a great way to look at this data. Let's move to the next line. Contacts added monthly. It's the same data, but now we're looking at a count. How many individuals were added to our contact list? You can quickly skim this data and go, wow, March is a great month. I'm skimming through. August is a great month. And actually, April's not bad either. So we can easily understand how many people we're adding. We can understand what we did in April that was decent, but not as good as, maybe March, where we had an event, for example. And what this tells us is what to do more of, what to do less of, what worked, what didn't. So I'm actually going to suggest we scrap donor list growth rate altogether because it's not very useful. And we use contacts added monthly to make decisions about how to add more people to our contact list. I simply wanted to show you how looking at the same data in different ways can really be eye-opening. If you're struggling with data and it's not telling you what you want to know, try looking at it in different ways. You might be surprised at what it tells you. All right. Recurring donation growth rate, the rate of growth in funds from recurring donation programs specifically. Here we're looking through and we see 4, 5, 6. Wow, this jumps quite nicely. 6, 8, 9, 9, and 10. Our recurring donation program is obviously doing well. I remember I said to hold off on analyzing average growth rate because I wanted to come back to it and show you correlation. So if you look at average growth rate up here, average gift size rather, my apologies, you can see that when average gift size begins to go down, recurring donation growth rate begins to jump. So something happens in July, August, and September where our recurring donation growth rate is still high, but our average gift size begins to recover. And I can tell you what happened was we turned on Smart Ask on our forms. Now, I know a lot of people here today are Keela users. Smart Ask is a form where you can allow the intelligence in Keela to suggest a donation amount that's specific to each donor's history. So it's going to suggest the amount that it knows will maximize the likeliness of their donation. So maximize their donation. If someone consistently gives, $400 and your donation form asks for 20, they might give 20. But if someone's consistently giving $400, your donation form should suggest 400, 500, and maybe 1,000. So Smart Ask is a great tool for maximizing donations and increasing average gift size. We turned it on in July. You can see it increased our average gift size and it did not decrease our recurring donation growth rate. This is a great win for our organization and something that we can measure with our KPIs. Now let's quickly look at lagging indicators before we wrap up. Lagging indicators are measuring your goals, your end goals. So they're very important because you want to see quickly if your goals are on track before the end of your year. Donor lifetime value, how much revenue a single donor from this segment is likely to generate from the moment they first donate to the time they lapse. Now, a lot of people look at donor lifetime value across all segments, and that's great to have for board reporting. It's great to know after the fact. When you break your donor lifetime value into segments, say under 100, under 500, and under 5,000, you can actually see how your outreach and your communication with different donor segments is impacting your donor lifetime value. You can focus in on the under 100 donors, which, they're a different kind of donor than your major gift donors. And you can talk to them differently and see if your communication is working to increase your donor lifetime value. So I'd recommend segmenting it so that you can see how your efforts are causing your donor lifetime value to increase or decrease. Donor retention rate, the percentage of donors who give to your organization 1 year and then give again the following year. Now, one clear thing about KPIs is if you're doing great, don't change anything, but make sure you know why you're doing great. Donor retention rate's benchmark is 25%. Our donor retention rate in this organization is well above 35 into 48% at its height. That's fantastic. KPIs are going to tell you what to keep doing and what to do more of, as much as they're going to tell you what to change. So make sure you recognize these indicators when you see them. Now, last thing we have here is total funds raised and total funds raised cumulative. So it's growing month over month for a total. The reason I've included this is simply so that you can see your forecast. You can look ahead. Now, we see that total funds raised, if we look at our final quarter of this scorecard, we're looking at July, August, and September. Now, if you take an average, we're bringing in about $70,000 in funds each month. So we can predict that we'll probably bring in that same $70,000 in funds for October, November, and December, our year end. We also know that we have our big gala coming up. We do some quick math and we see, wow, we're pretty close to the $1 million mark, but we need to raise, a little more than normal at our gala in order to hit $1 million in fundraising revenue for the year. We're going to run some simple forecasts because we have this data, and we're going to set a target of $1 million as our gala goal. The entire community and all of our donors can be in on it. They can help us get to that 1 million mark, and it can really raise the momentum and excitement around hitting a new milestone. Because we have this dashboard, because we know where we are to date, and because we can predict the next 3 months going forward, we can easily say that our gala target is $246,000. And we can set a little dashboard up at the gala to show people how close we are to achieving that milestone. So that's it. That is the last metric. And I wanted to show you how you use leading and lagging indicators, and specifically lagging indicators that help you forecast and predict forward, which is a whole nother element of this, and something that once you get comfortable with your KPIs, you can do really effectively. So with that, I will happily open it up to questions. And if anyone wants to ask about this dashboard or my deck, feel free.
Thank you so much, Tazzy. That was a learning experience for me as well. I know that I work day to day in metrics, but even listening to you, I always pick up extra things. We will open it up to questions. We have one from Tanya Miller. How are grants tracked with funding in addition to donors?
How are grants tracked? So I guess it depends on the type of grant. You could have a couple different options. And here I'm just thinking from the top of my head. You would definitely want total grants received in dollars. And you'd want to look at that month over month, because that will show you exactly what's coming in when. And that will allow you to see if there's any correlation with grant money received and maybe some of your other metrics. Now, consider also using a correlation or a ratio. So maybe you have something like percentage of total funds from grants, because you want to know when you're looking at your total funds received, how much is grants, how much is received from donors, and what your different revenue streams are, so you can make sure that you're nicely diversified. Did that answer your question, or is there more that you were looking to get out of that?
I will wait for Tanya's response, but otherwise, in the meantime, I'll jump into the next question. So it says to track a minimum of 3 months, but how much should you look at month over month? So is looking at a year versus 2 years versus 5 years, is that too much information to look at?
Yeah, great question. So more data from a time perspective is nice to have, but what you don't want to do is get confused because there's too much data. So if you can start with 12 months, always have 12 months at least in front of you, because you can pull all of your historical data, then that'll give you a great starting point. In fact, you'll be ahead of the game. The reason why is the way I did this analysis here today. I looked at these, I think it's 9 months, and I was able to see trends. And what that will allow you to do is, if you were in your organization for those 9 months, you can actually find the big jumps or the dips or whatever it is in the trend data and say, what happened here? Why did this change? So you can look back. And then as you're adding numbers, you can start to see what's normal or what's a big spike, because some things will naturally be more volatile while other things are going to stay pretty consistent. And when you do see a spike, you go, oh, that's very unusual. And the reason I know that's unusual is because it's been consistent for the last 6 months, 12 months in a row. And now we just saw a huge jump. So it'll help you make decisions because the changes will show you whether they're normal volatility or unusual volatility, or let's say you dip down to a place you haven't been in 12 months. That would be like kind of an emergency. You'd say, hey, we're at a place right now that we haven't seen in over 12 months. We need to fix this immediately versus, yeah, we're back here. We kind of come back here every 3 months. This seems to be normal and cyclical. So looking at your data longer term will help you see trends. And looking even 2 years back is a great way to look back and say, okay, look where we've come from, look where we are today. Hopefully there's been some great progress. And if there hasn't been, that might be an area that you focus on. You say, we can do better here because it's been pretty flat.
Thanks, Tazzy. We've got another question from Philip coming in. Would separating events be similar to separating grants?
Yeah, so this is where your customization comes into place. Every organization is going to have a different focus and they're going to have different things that are important. So if grants are a big part of your organization, and I hope they are, because grants are a great way to get revenue in, you definitely want some metrics around grants. Likewise, if you run lots of events and those are important, you want to have some event metrics. So figure out which event metrics make the most sense and put them on your dashboard. You might have 20 or 30 KPIs. I wouldn't let it get too big, but start adding 1 or 2 for things that matter. And events might be it, where you might have, oh, maybe it's returning event participants because you want to know, you have these huge big galas, how many donors come back time after time, because those are really going to be the most committed, engaged individuals in your organization. So maybe that's the metric you want to focus on. And then when you're planning things, you're actually going to say, what do we do differently this event to ensure that more people from the last event show up again? They don't feel like, oh, I've been to one event, I don't need to go again. You want these people to come every time because those are going to be your most committed individuals. Now, that's just one area you could focus on. So you need to decide by looking at the list of event KPIs, and you can literally Google nonprofit event KPIs and you'll get 100 of them. Google's fantastic for finding KPIs, and then skim through them and see which ones you think will measure what you're trying to do the best. And even better, they might have a benchmark if you can find something online. But it's a great place to start, but make it your own. And to answer your question, yes, you'd want a section separate for events, separate for grants. And when I say section, same dashboard, because you want to see all the correlations, but a separate line with maybe 2 or 3 KPIs on events.
Thanks for that clarification. We've got a question coming in from Sarah, and it's on reporting to the board. And so we talk about creating our fundraising dashboards and tracking our metrics, but how do we distill that down to what exactly the board needs to know?
Yeah, great question. There's 2 ways to approach this. It depends how engaged and active your board is. Some boards will want to see your scorecard and to see a summary, your dashboard, and they'll want to see a summary. So you can take all of your metrics from your dashboard and show maybe your growth rate over that year, or show maybe where you've improved the most and where you're struggling the most. So that would be sort of a summary of all of the monthly metrics. You can even show little graphs that show, a trend line over the year that you've tracked. This is where that metric has grown from, which is really nice insight. I think the key would be that the board doesn't want to dig into the minutia of it. That's how you make management decisions, day-to-day decisions. They want to see a summary of it. They want to see, this is all great, but what does it mean? What's my takeaway? How do I know that you're managing the organization well and that it's in the best hands possible? So you kind of want to show where, and I should add, where can we lean in and help you if you've got a good engaged board? So you want to show them where you're winning and where maybe you're struggling as a summary of this data. And that would be, I usually take kind of summary data at the end of every quarter and at the end of every year for our board. And we show them, this growth rate from the beginning of year to the end of year. And if it's great, we show that. If it's not great, we show that and we ask for their help. So it's up to you whether you show them this whole dashboard. They might like to see that you're doing it. It'll give them confidence in your ability to be data driven. But I would say creating a summary is important, or they might get frustrated because they don't want to dig through it all. They want to see what it means, what the analysis conclusion is. And that's something you'll need to do.
As we enter reporting season, I can almost hear the pencils through my Zoom taking notes. Elsie, I think these next couple of questions are for you. So this is from an anonymous attendee. Is it more effective to link to the Keela donation form or embed the code in an email? The challenge we are having is that MailChimp doesn't accept the embed code.
Great question. I think for me and in my experience, the best practice above all would be to embed the donation form on your website and link your website to the eBlast. A couple of reasons. It's going to help with your website traffic, which is something Tassie's been talking about today. So the more folks you can get to your website, the more information you can give them about their cause. But sometimes that's not appropriate. Sometimes you just want a really quick way for folks to donate. And in that case, I would say still link to a donation form. And the reason for that is that when you're embedding donation forms in emails, we use a thing called an iframe, which allows you to make changes to your donation form after it's been embedded. So you don't have to keep embedding it every time you make a change. And sometimes email providers do have trouble with that kind of code. So I would just link to a button, and then that way folks can exit out of the email and it won't have any compatibility issues that way.
Thanks, Elsie. And then building on that question, also to manage the pipeline of prospects, does Keela have a way to track opens versus if the contact has ever donated to those who don't open but never donate to assess why they aren't donating? So any suggestions, I guess, on the conversion element of this?
So we don't have, it's sort of that pipeline, inbuilt pipeline tracking is not something we have at the moment. So definitely something we could add to our product portal and something we can investigate in the future. At the moment, it's more customizable. So you can use things like custom fields and things like tags to track that pipeline process. If you like, you can track whatever information you need as a custom field in Keela. So we do have access to the open and click rates. You can view that, and you can view the list of folks who've opened. Perhaps you'd like to add a label to them to show that they opened, and then maybe you could report on folks with that label who've also donated at the same time. So while we don't have the pipeline at the moment, just because it's different for everyone, we do have the ability to create your own labels and then compare multiple filters in a report at once, which is something I can add to our frequently requested reports. It's an article that we have online where folks come with all these different ideas about the multi-layered reports they'd like to see, and we try and map them out for folks who need them in the future. So that's something I can definitely get chucked up on there.
Great, thanks, Elsie. And then the third part to that question is, does Keela integrate with Google Analytics?
Great question. Not at the moment, but it's in the pipeline. So speaking of pipelines, that's one that's in our product pipeline. We're really excited about it because I think it's going to unlock a lot of grants possibilities and really sort of empower everybody with their own eBlasts and their own website traffic analytics as well. So stay tuned, look forward for that.
Great, and with the completion of that, it looks like we have hit 11 a.m. So I will close out our webinar. That concludes today's session for today. Thank you so much, Tassie. I'm sure you're going to make both 2020 reporting and 2021 planning a breeze. I know Toby will pop the link to the custom dashboard into the chat again, so you can all access it. You'll need to make a copy and save it to your computer to begin inputting your own data. Finally, I just want to remind everyone that the session today was recorded, so you'll be receiving the recording along with Tassie's slide deck by the end of the week, if not by the end of today. Thanks again, everyone. We'll see you at the next webinar, and I'll pass it off to Tassie for a final goodbye.
Perfect. Thanks so much, everyone. I really enjoyed running through that. And as I said, if there's anything that you feel would be really helpful as a follow-up webinar, like impact areas maybe, just let us know. Send us a note, because we want to create content that you guys can really use and find valuable. So any suggestions is appreciated.
Excellent. All right, everybody, have a great day. Bye-bye now.